The power went out at exactly 7:43 p.m., right when I was about to crack open my third beer and forget about another day of crawling through other people's problems. The house plunged into darkness, and for a moment I thought maybe the universe was giving me a sign. Maybe it was time to sit in the dark and think about how my life had become as broken as the wiring in this old colonial that Carla and I had bought back when we still pretended to love each other. My name's Danny Sullivan, and I've been fixing other people's messes for 23 years. Started as an apprentice electrician right out of high school, worked my way up to running my own contracting business. Nothing fancy, just honest work for honest pay. At least that's what I used to tell myself before I learned that honesty is a luxury most people can't afford. I fumbled around in the kitchen drawer for a flashlight, cursing under my breath. Carla was on another one of her business trips to Boston, working late at the law firm where she'd been climbing the ladder for the past 5 years. Funny how her trips had become more frequent lately, and how she always came back smelling like expensive cologne that wasn't mine. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness as I made my way to the basement. Our house was built in 1923, and the electrical system showed every year of its age. I'd been meaning to rewire the whole place, but between work and Carla's constant complaints about money, I never seemed to find the time or motivation. I called Lenny Morrison, my old buddy from the union days. Lenny had gone independent like me, specializing in electrical work that required a certain flexibility when it came to permits and code compliance. "Danny boy," Lenny's gravelly voice came through the phone. "What's got you calling at this ungodly hour?" "Power's out again. Think you can swing by tomorrow and take a look at the main panel?" "Sure thing. But I'm telling you, that old house of yours needs a complete overhaul. You can't keep patching a system that's older than disco." The next morning, Lenny showed up with his toolkit and that crooked grin that had gotten us both into trouble more times than I could count. He was a short, wiry guy with hands that could thread a needle or hotwire a car with equal skill. We'd boxed together at Murphy's gym back in the day, before life and marriage had softened my edges and hardened my heart. "Let's see what we're dealing with," Lenny said, following me down to the basement. The basement was my domain, the one place in the house where Carla never ventured. Too many spiders, she claimed, though I suspected she just didn't want to acknowledge the foundation problems that were slowly eating away at our equity. I kept my tools down there, along with a mini fridge stocked with beer and a ratty old couch where I'd been sleeping more often than not. Lenny started poking around the electrical panel, muttering technical jargon under his breath. I was half listening, thinking about the stack of unpaid invoices on my desk upstairs, when he suddenly stopped talking. "Danny, come take a look at this." I walked over to where he was kneeling by the far wall, behind the water heater. He was shining his flashlight on what looked like a section of newer drywall, painted to match the rest of the basement, but clearly installed more recently. "This wasn't here last time I was down here," he said. "Looks like someone put up a wall. See how the electrical conduit roots around it?" My stomach dropped. I'd never noticed it before, probably because it was hidden behind boxes of Christmas decorations and old furniture. But now that Lenny pointed it out, it was obvious that someone had walled off a section of the basement. "You think there's a room back there?" I asked. "Only one way to find out." Lenny went to his truck and came back with a sledgehammer. "Hope you don't mind a little demolition work." The first swing sent a spiderweb of cracks through the drywall. The second swing opened up a hole big enough to shine a light through. What I saw on the other side made my stomach run cold. It was a small room, maybe 6 feet by 8 feet, with a single folding chair and a card table. On the table was a laptop computer, still plugged in and running. The walls were covered with photographs, dozens of them, all printed on regular copy paper and taped up like some kind of demented art gallery. Photos of my wife. Photos of my wife with a man I recognized as Travis Kellerman, the project manager at her law firm. Photos of them kissing, embracing, and doing things that made my hands shake as I held the flashlight. "Jesus Christ," Lenny whispered behind me. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the camera equipment set up in the corner, with cables running up through the ceiling toward the main floor of the house. Someone had been watching, recording, documenting every moment of my wife's betrayal. And based on the dust patterns and the age of some of the photos, they'd been doing it for months. I climbed through the hole in the wall, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The laptop screen showed a split view from multiple cameras, one in our bedroom, one in the living room, one in the kitchen. I could see myself on the screen, standing in the basement, looking like a man whose world had just collapsed. Next to the laptop was a manila folder stuffed with papers. Love letters, printed emails, hotel receipts, even a burner phone with text messages that made me want to throw up. The level of detail was staggering, like someone had been building a case file on my wife's infidelity. Who the heck would do this? I asked, more to myself than to Lenny. I don't know, but they did you a favor, Lenny said. Now you know the truth. I picked up one of the photos, a particularly explicit one that showed Carla and Travis in our bed, the bed I'd been sleeping in for 15 years. The date stamp showed it was taken just 3 days ago, while I was working a job in Springfield. That's when I noticed something else. In the corner of the photo, barely visible, was a woman's reflection in the dresser mirror. A woman with short blonde hair and a distinctive scar on her left cheek that I recognized immediately. Jenna Hartley, Carla's best friend since law school, the maid of honor at our wedding, the woman who'd been coming to our house for dinner every Sunday for the past 10 years. Lenny, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, I think I know who set this up. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the hidden room, going through every piece of evidence, every photo, every document. The scope of the betrayal was breathtaking. It wasn't just an affair. It was a systematic dismantling of my marriage, orchestrated by someone who knew exactly how to hurt me. The emails between Carla and Travis went back 8 months. The ones between Carla and Jenna went back even further. They'd been planning this, discussing how to handle me when the time came to make their relationship public. There were discussions about divorce attorneys, asset division, even speculation about whether I'd cause problems or go quietly. The most incriminating evidence was a series of text messages from just 2 weeks ago. Jenna, he's getting suspicious. Saw him looking at your phone yesterday. Carla, maybe it's time to accelerate the timeline. Jenna, I can plant some evidence. Make it look like he's unstable. Violent, even. Carla, do it. I want this over with. They were planning to frame me, paint me as a controlling and volatile husband to justify the divorce and maximize Carla's settlement. The hidden cameras weren't just for documenting the affair. They were for creating evidence of my dangerous behavior when I inevitably discovered the truth. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. I'd spent 23 years solving problems, finding solutions that other people couldn't see. I'd learned to think 3 steps ahead, to anticipate complications before they happened. And now, for the first time in years, I had a problem that really mattered. I was going to destroy them all. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Murphy's gym. I needed to think, and I'd always done my best thinking while hitting the heavy bag. The gym was mostly empty at 10 a.m., just a few retirees doing their cardio and Mick Flanagan working the speed bag like he was trying to beat it to death. Mick was an old friend from my boxing days, a guy who'd never quite made it as a pro, but still carried himself like he owned the world. He ran security for some of the less reputable businesses in town, the kind of work that required more muscle than brains. Danny Sullivan, he called out when he saw me. Haven't seen you in here for months. Carla finally let you off the leash? Something like that, I said, wrapping my hands. I spent an hour working the bags, letting my anger fuel each punch. Mick watched me with growing interest. You're hitting different today, he said during a water break. Like you're trying to end something. Maybe I am. Want to talk about it? I looked at Mick, weighing my options. He wasn't the smartest guy in the world, but he was loyal, and he had skills that might prove useful. What do you know about surveillance? I asked. Enough. Why? Someone's been watching me, recording me in my own house. Mick's face darkened. That's seriously messed up, Danny. You call the cops? Can't. It's complicated. How complicated? I told him everything. About the hidden room, the photos, the plan to frame me. Mick listened without interruption, his expression growing more serious with each detail. So what are you going to do? He asked when I finished. I'm going to give them exactly what they expect, but not the way they expect it. That afternoon, I went back to the hidden room and started planning. I had advantages that Carla and her conspirators didn't know about. I had access to the surveillance system they'd set up. I had evidence of their real plan. And I had something they'd never given me credit for. Intelligence. The first step was reconnaissance. I needed to understand their routines, their weaknesses, their pressure points. Travis Kellerman lived in a pristine craftsman house on Elm Street, the kind of place that screamed successful professional. He drove a BMW, worked out at an upscale gym, and had a reputation as the golden boy at Carla's firm. But everyone has secrets, and I was going to find his. I started following him, learning his patterns. Coffee at Starbucks every morning at 7:15. Lunch at the same sandwich shop 3 days a week. Thursday night drinks at O'Malley's with his coworkers. Friday afternoons at the Marriott downtown, where he met my wife for their weekly tryst. It took me 3 days to find his weakness. Travis had a gambling problem. Not the kind that gets you in trouble with loan sharks, but the kind that eats away at your savings account $20 at a time. He had a standing poker game every Tuesday night in the back room of Mickey's Tavern, and from what I could observe, he wasn't very good at it. More importantly, he was the kind of man who couldn't handle being embarrassed. I watched him lose his temper when another player called his bluff, saw how his face turned red when the other guys laughed at his mistakes. Pride was his weakness, and I was going to use it against him. Jenna was a different challenge. She was smart, careful, and paranoid. She lived alone in a downtown condo, worked as a freelance marketing consultant, and seemed to have no regular schedule. But she had one habit that would prove to be her downfall. She got her hair done at Salon Mystique every other Thursday at 2 p.m. And Salon Mystique was owned by Rita Kowalski, whose husband owed me a favor from a job I'd done for him the previous year. Carla was the most difficult target because I knew her so well. She was methodical, suspicious, and had a lawyer's instinct for covering her tracks. But she also had an ego that demanded recognition for her cleverness. She couldn't resist dropping hints about her plans, little comments designed to make me feel stupid for not seeing what was happening right under my nose. That was going to be her undoing. I spent the next week setting up my surveillance operation. Lenny helped me install cameras in strategic locations around town, the parking lot at Travis's gym, the entrance to Mickey's Tavern, the street outside Jenna's condo. Nothing illegal, just public spaces where anyone had a right to record. I also started documenting everything. Every meeting between Carla and Travis, every phone call between Carla and Jenna, every piece of evidence that showed the scope of their conspiracy. I was building my own case file, one that would make their evidence look like amateur hour. The first phase of my revenge was simple. I was going to make Travis's life uncomfortable. Nothing dramatic, nothing that could be traced back to me, just a series of small annoyances that would gradually escalate his stress level. It started with his car. Travis was obsessive about that BMW, washing it twice a week and parking it in the same spot at the far end of every parking lot to avoid door dings. So I began a campaign of minor vandalism. A key scratch along the passenger side, dog feces under the door handles, sugar in the gas tank, not enough to cause permanent damage, just enough to make the engine run rough. Each incident was carefully timed and documented. I made sure I had alibis, witnesses who could place me somewhere else when the vandalism occurred. But I also made sure Travis would know it wasn't random. The scratches spelled out words like cheater and liar. The placement of the dog feces was too precise to be accidental. After the fourth incident, Travis went to the police. I knew because Lenny had a friend who worked dispatch, and she told us about the complaint. Travis was convinced someone was targeting him, but he had no proof and no suspects. Detective Ray Harkness was assigned to the case. I knew Ray from high school. We'd played football together before he went into the Army and I went into the trades. He was a good cop, thorough but not brilliant, the kind of guy who followed procedure and rarely looked beyond the obvious. Ray came to see me on a Thursday afternoon just as I was finishing up a rewiring job at the Henderson's house. "Danny Sullivan," he said, walking up to my truck. "Heard you might be having some marital troubles." "News travels fast in this town," I replied, coiling up an extension cord. "Travis Kellerman filed a complaint. Says someone's been vandalizing his car. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" I looked Ray straight in the eye. "Why would I care about Travis Kellerman's car?" "Because he's sleeping with your wife." "According to who?" Ray studied my face, looking for tells. "Word gets around, Danny. People talk. People talk about a lot of things. Doesn't make them true. So you're saying you don't know about the affair?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Ray, if I knew my wife was cheating on me, do you really think I'd be wasting time scratching up some guy's car? I'd be talking to a divorce lawyer." It was a good answer, and Ray bought it. He asked a few more questions, established that I had alibis for the times when the vandalism occurred, and left with nothing more than suspicions. But I knew he'd be watching me now, which meant I had to be even more careful with the next phase of my plan. The second phase began the following Tuesday at Travis's poker game. I'd been monitoring his routine for weeks, and I knew he always stopped at the ATM outside Mickey's Tavern to withdraw his gambling money. What he didn't know was that I'd installed a small camera in the bus stop across the street, positioned to capture his PIN number. It took 3 weeks to get a clear shot of him entering his code, but patience is a virtue in my line of work. Once I had his PIN, I waited for the perfect opportunity to use it. That opportunity came when Travis went to O'Malley's for his Thursday night drinks with coworkers. While he was inside getting drunk and probably bragging about his conquest of my wife, I was at an ATM across town, withdrawing the maximum daily limit from his checking account. I didn't keep the money. That would have been theft. Instead, I donated it to the Salvation Army, making sure to get a receipt with the transaction details. Then I mailed the receipt to Travis's office along with a note that read, "Thought you might want this for your tax records. A concerned citizen." The beauty of this approach was that Travis couldn't report it as theft without admitting that someone had his PIN number. And since the money went to charity, he couldn't even claim he'd been financially harmed. It was just embarrassing enough to rattle him without crossing any serious legal lines. But Travis was smarter than I'd given him credit for. Instead of going to the police, he went to Carla. And Carla, being a lawyer, immediately suspected that her husband might be behind the harassment. I knew this because I was monitoring their conversations through the surveillance system they'd set up in my own house. The irony was delicious. They'd given me the perfect way to spy on their planning sessions. "It has to be Danny," Carla said during a phone call on Friday afternoon. "He's the only one with motive." "But how could he know my PIN?" Travis replied. "I've never used that ATM when he was around." "He's an electrician, Travis. He knows about cameras and surveillance equipment. Maybe he's been watching you." "That's seriously creepy. That's Danny. He's always been obsessive about details. It's one of the things I used to find attractive about him." Used to, past tense, like our entire marriage was just a phase she'd grown out of. "So what do we do?" Travis asked. "We accelerate the timeline. I'm going to file for divorce next week." "What about the evidence we've been collecting? Jenna thinks we have enough to prove he's unstable. The harassment campaign actually helps our case. They were using my own revenge against me, turning it into justification for their betrayal. It was brilliant, and it made me hate them even more. But it also gave me an idea. If they wanted evidence of my instability, I was going to give them evidence, but not the kind they expected. The next phase of my plan required Mick's help. I needed someone with no connection to Carla or Travis, someone who could act as my proxy in situations where I needed an alibi. "I need you to start a fight with Travis Kellerman," I told Mick over beers at Murphy's gym. "Just walk up and punch him?" "Nothing that obvious. I need it to look like he started it." I explained my plan. Mick would go to O'Malley's on Thursday night and position himself near Travis's usual table. He'd listen to the conversation, wait for Travis to say something about women or relationships, then take offense and escalate the situation. "Make him throw the first punch," I said, "then defend yourself. But don't hurt him too badly. We want him embarrassed, not hospitalized." "What if he doesn't take the bait?" "He will. The guy's got a temper, and he's been under a lot of stress lately. Just push the right buttons." Thursday night went perfectly. According to Mick's report, Travis had been drinking heavily and bragging to his coworkers about his complicated relationship situation. When Mick made a comment about men who cheat on their wives being cowards, Travis took it personally. The fight lasted about 30 seconds. Travis threw a wild haymaker that Mick easily ducked. Then Mick put him on the floor with a single body blow. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would cause permanent damage, just enough to humiliate him in front of his colleagues. The best part was that several people recorded the incident on their phones. By Friday morning, the video was all over social media, showing Travis getting knocked out by a guy half his size. The comments were brutal, exactly the kind of public shaming that someone with his ego couldn't tolerate. But Travis's humiliation was just a side benefit. The real purpose of the fight was to establish a pattern of behavior that would support my ultimate plan. I was setting up a narrative where Travis was the aggressor, the unstable one, the man who couldn't control his temper when confronted with the consequences of his actions. Every incident, every piece of evidence, was building toward a climax where he would be forced to reveal his true character, and when that happened, I would be ready. The call came on a rainy Tuesday morning in October. Carla's voice was cold and professional, like she was speaking to a client instead of her husband of 15 years. "Danny, we need to talk. I'm filing for divorce." I figured as much, I said, not bothering to sound surprised. I want you out of the house by Friday. I've already spoken to a lawyer about temporary custody and support arrangements. Custody? We don't have kids, Carla. Custody of the assets, Danny. The house, the cars, the business, everything we've built together. Everything we've built. As if she'd done anything but spend the money I earned while she played house with her boyfriend. Fine, I said, but I want to talk to you face to face, tonight. I don't think that's a good idea. I'm not going to cause trouble, Carla. I just want to understand why. There was a long pause. I could almost hear her calculating, trying to figure out if this was some kind of trap. Okay, she said finally, but I'm bringing Jenna and Travis. Your boyfriend's invited to our divorce discussion. Travis is a colleague who's been helping me with the legal aspects. Right, a colleague. She hung up without saying goodbye. That evening, they arrived together in Travis's BMW. I watched from the living room window as they sat in the car for several minutes, probably discussing strategy. Jenna was in the back seat, typing something on her phone. Travis kept checking his rearview mirror like he expected an ambush. They were scared of me. Good. I opened the front door before they could knock, standing in the doorway with my arms crossed. Travis hung back while Carla and Jenna approached. Hello, Danny, Jenna said with that fake smile she'd been using on me for 10 years. How are you holding up? Just peachy, come on in. I led them to the living room, where I'd arranged the furniture to create a confrontational setting. 3 chairs facing the couch where I would sit, like a job interview or an interrogation. Can I get anyone coffee, I asked. Beer, something stronger? We're fine, Carla said, settling into the middle chair. Let's just get this over with. Travis took the chair to her left, as far from me as possible. Jenna sat on Carla's right, close enough to offer support, but positioned so she could see both of us. So, I said, leaning back on the couch, 15 years of marriage, and it ends with a phone call. I have to admit, Carla, your timing is interesting. What do you mean? I mean, why now? What's changed? Carla exchanged a glance with Jenna. We've grown apart, Danny. We want different things. Different things like Travis? The silence stretched for several seconds. Travis shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his face turning red. I don't know what you're implying, Carla said. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts. You're sleeping with Travis. Have been for months. The question is whether you're going to keep lying about it. Danny, Jenna said, I think you're upset and maybe not thinking clearly. Oh, I'm thinking very clearly, I interrupted. Clearer than I have in years. I reached behind the couch and pulled out a manila folder, the same one I'd found in the hidden room. I opened it and spread some of the photos across the coffee table. The reaction was immediate and telling. Carla went pale. Travis jumped to his feet. Jenna just stared at the photos with a calculating expression. Where did you get these? Carla demanded. Does it matter? The question is, what are we going to do about it? This is harassment, Travis said, his voice shaking. I'm calling the police. Go ahead. I'm sure they'd be very interested in how these photos were taken, especially the ones shot in my bedroom. Travis reached for his phone, but Jenna stopped him with a gesture. Let's all calm down, she said. Danny, what do you want? I want the truth. I want to know how long this has been going on, and I want to know why you thought you could get away with it. We weren't trying to get away with anything, Carla said. I was going to tell you. When? After you'd finished framing me for domestic misuse? Another silence. This time, all 3 of them looked genuinely shocked. I know about the plan, I continued. The fake evidence, the staged incidents, the whole elaborate scheme to make me look like a violent husband. Did you really think I was that stupid? Danny, Jenna said carefully, I think you're paranoid. No one's trying to frame you for anything. I laughed. Jenna, I have to hand it to you. The hidden camera setup was genius. Using my own basement against me, documenting everything for months. But you made one mistake. What mistake? I pulled out my phone and played an audio recording. Jenna's voice filled the room. I can plant some evidence. Make it look like he's unstable. Violent, even. The color drained from her face. You recorded us? Carla whispered. You recorded me first. I just returned the favor. Travis was backing toward the door. This is insane. I'm leaving. Sit down, Travis. Something in my voice made him stop. Maybe it was the tone, or maybe it was the way I was looking at him. But he slowly returned to his chair. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Carla, you want a divorce? Fine. But it's going to be on my terms, not yours. No claims of misuse, no demands for alimony, no fights over assets. You take what you brought to the marriage and walk away. That's not how divorce law works, Danny, she said. It is when your soon-to-be ex-husband has evidence of adultery and conspiracy to commit fraud. You can't prove conspiracy. I played another recording, this one of Carla and Travis discussing their plan to handle me, then another of Jenna explaining how she'd planted the cameras. I can prove whatever I need to prove, I said. The question is whether you want this to be easy or hard. What about Travis? Jenna asked. Travis is going to resign from the law firm and leave town tonight. I'm not going anywhere, Travis said, but his voice lacked conviction. Yes, you are, because if you don't, I'm going to release these photos to everyone at your office, along with the recordings of you and Carla planning to defraud me. How do you think that's going to affect your career? You're blackmailing us, Carla said. I'm negotiating, there's a difference. And if we don't agree to your terms, I smiled. Then tomorrow morning, copies of everything go to the police, the State Bar Association, and the local newspaper. I'm sure they'd love to run a story about a prominent local attorney and her boyfriend's conspiracy to frame her husband. The room fell silent, except for the sound of rain against the windows. I could see them weighing their options, calculating the risks. Finally, Jenna spoke. What do you want from me? I want you to disappear. Leave town, change your name, start over somewhere else. And if I ever see you again, if you ever contact Carla again, I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. This is extortion, she said. This is justice. Travis was the first to break. Okay, he said quietly. I'll resign. I'll leave. Tonight, I repeated. Tonight. Carla was staring at the photos on the coffee table, her face a mask of rage and defeat. You bastard, she whispered. I learned from the best. One by one, they agreed to my terms. Travis would resign and leave town immediately. Jenna would end all contact with Carla and relocate to another state. Carla would file for an uncontested divorce with no claims for support or property division. As they prepared to leave, Jenna turned back to me. You know, Danny, I never thought you had it in you. Had what in me? The butcher instinct. The ability to be truly ruthless. I thought about that for a moment. Maybe I didn't, until you taught me. After they left, I sat in the empty house, listening to the rain and thinking about what I'd become. 3 hours ago, I'd been the victim. Now I was the victor. But victory felt different than I'd expected. Colder, lonelier, more hollow. I walked down to the basement and looked at the hidden room one more time. Tomorrow I would tear it down, erase all evidence of what had happened here. But tonight I wanted to remember. I wanted to hold on to the feeling of being in control, of having the power to shape other people's lives, because I had a feeling I was going to need that power again. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in O'Malley's nursing a beer when Detective Ray Harkness slid into the booth across from me. Danny Sullivan, he said. Heard you're a free man now. Divorce was finalized yesterday. Carla moved to Boston, got a job with some big firm up there. And Travis Kellerman? What about him? Disappeared about a month ago. Just stopped showing up to work, abandoned his lease, left town without telling anyone where he was going. I took a sip of my beer. People do strange things sometimes. His boss at the law firm said he seemed scared, like he was running from something. Maybe he owed money to the wrong people. I heard he had a gambling problem. Ray studied my face. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? About what? His gambling or his disappearance? Either, both. Ray, I've been pretty busy with my own problems. My wife left me, remember? I haven't had time to worry about what Travis Kellerman is doing with his life. What about Jenna Hartley? My hand tightened slightly on my beer bottle. What about her? She left town around the same time, closed her business, sold her condo, moved to California. Her neighbors said she seemed scared too. Scared of what? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Ray leaned forward, lowering his voice. Danny, I've known you for 20 years. You're not a violent man, but you're smart. Smarter than most people give you credit for. And when smart men get pushed too far, they don't usually explode. They plan. What's your point, Ray? My point is that 3 people who were involved in destroying your marriage all suddenly developed serious problems at the same time. That's either a heck of a coincidence or someone orchestrated it. I finished my beer and stood up. Ray, if someone hurt my wife and her friends, don't you think they deserved whatever happened to them? Probably, but that doesn't make it legal. Good thing I didn't do anything illegal then. I left him sitting in the booth, probably wondering if he should pursue the matter further, but I wasn't worried. I'd been careful, methodical, and most importantly, I'd stayed within the bounds of the law. Everything I'd done could be justified as self-defense or legitimate negotiation. The truth was, I hadn't destroyed their lives. I'd simply given them a choice: face the consequences of their actions publicly or handle it privately. They'd chosen privacy, and privacy had a price. Travis had left town because he couldn't handle the shame of being exposed as a homewrecker and a conspirator. His career in the legal field was effectively over. Word travels fast in that community, and nobody wants to hire a lawyer who can't be trusted. Jenna had disappeared because she knew I had enough evidence to destroy her reputation and possibly put her in jail for conspiracy and invasion of privacy. Running was her best option, and she'd taken it. Carla had agreed to the divorce terms because fighting would have meant public exposure of the affair and the framing attempt. As a lawyer, she understood that her career couldn't survive that kind of scandal. I hadn't forced any of them to do anything. I'd simply presented them with information and let them make their own choices. But there was one more piece of business to handle. The following Saturday, I drove to the old warehouse district by the docks. It was the kind of place where people minded their own business and asked few questions. I'd arranged to meet someone there, someone who had information I needed. Marcus Webb was waiting for me in the shadows between two abandoned buildings. He was a private investigator who specialized in cases that regular cops couldn't or wouldn't handle. I'd hired him to do some background research on the people who'd destroyed my marriage. "You got what I asked for?" I said. Marcus handed me a thick envelope. "Everything you wanted to know about Jenna Hartley's operation. She's been running this scam for years, Danny. Your wife wasn't her first target." I opened the envelope and scanned the contents. Photos, financial records, testimonies from other men who'd been victimized by Jenna's schemes. She would identify married men with assets, befriend their wives, then orchestrate affairs that could be used for maximum financial gain in divorce proceedings. "How many others?" I asked. "At least 6 that I could document, probably more. She's made a career out of destroying marriages." "What about the others, the previous victims?" "Most of them got cleaned out, lost their houses, their businesses, their kids. A couple of them never recovered." I felt a familiar surge of anger, but this time it was cold and calculating, rather than hot and impulsive. Jenna hadn't just betrayed me. She'd built a business around destroying families. "Where is she now?" I asked. "San Diego." Using a different name, but I tracked her down. "She's already working on her next target, a real estate developer named Patterson." I studied the photos Marcus had taken. Jenna at a coffee shop, chatting with a woman who was probably Patterson's wife. The same friendly smile, the same calculated warmth that had fooled me for years. "What are you going to do?" Marcus asked. "I'm going to stop her." "How?" I smiled. The same way I stopped her before, with information. 2 days later, I sent an anonymous package to Robert Patterson in San Diego. It contained copies of all the evidence Marcus had gathered about Jenna's previous schemes, along with a detailed explanation of her methods and a warning about what she was planning. I also sent copies to the other victims Marcus had identified, along with contact information, so they could coordinate their responses. Some of them might want to pursue legal action. Others might just want to warn their communities. But all of them deserved to know that the woman who destroyed their lives was still out there, still hunting. I never found out exactly what happened to Jenna after that. Marcus reported that she'd left San Diego suddenly, abandoning her apartment and her new identity. She might have moved to another city, changed her name again, tried to start over somewhere else. Or she might have finally realized that her past had caught up with her, and that running wasn't going to solve her problems anymore. Either way, she was no longer my concern. 6 months after the divorce, I was rebuilding my life. The contracting business was doing well. Word had gotten around that I was reliable, discreet, and very good at solving problems that other people couldn't handle. I'd moved to a smaller house across town, a place with no hidden rooms and no painful memories. I'd also started dating again. Nothing serious, just dinner and conversation with women who appreciated honesty and weren't interested in games. It felt good to be with people who said what they meant and meant what they said. Sometimes I thought about Carla, wondered if she ever regretted what she'd done. But mostly I didn't. She'd made her choices, and she was living with the consequences. That was more justice than most people got in this world. The hidden room in the basement of my old house had been demolished and filled in before the new owners took possession. But I'd kept copies of everything I'd found there, stored in a safety deposit box along with my other important papers, just in case. Because I'd learned something important during those months of planning and execution. I'd learned that I was capable of things I'd never imagined, that I could be patient and ruthless and utterly without mercy when the situation called for it. I'd learned that I was very good at revenge. And in a world full of people like Carla, Travis, and Jenna, that was a valuable skill to have. The rain was falling again as I sat in my new living room, reading the newspaper and listening to music. The local section had a small item about a law firm in Boston that had fired an attorney for ethical violations. No names were mentioned, but I recognized the firm as the one where Carla had gotten her new job. Apparently, someone had sent them information about her previous conduct. Someone who knew about the conspiracy, the hidden cameras, the attempt to frame an innocent man for domestic misuse. I smiled and turned the page. Justice, I discovered, was a dish best served with patience, planning, and perfect documentation. And sometimes, if you were very good at what you did, it could be served again and again, as many times as necessary. Because people like Carla never really changed. They just found new victims. But now they had to worry about whether one of those victims might be someone like me. Someone who understood that the best revenge wasn't getting mad, it was getting even. And I was very, very good at getting even.